Here is a claim you have heard all week: a family ambushed at the 11th hour. The story goes like this: Prince Harry planned a trip home this summer. 5 days, his wife and his two small children. Then, just before the flight, the state pulled their protection away. The rug pulled out from under them. A father blocked from showing his own children his own country. It is a powerful story. It is built to make you angry. And it worked, because right now it is everywhere. But this is a channel that does one thing: we put the claim next to the record. So tonight we read the ruling, not the reaction, because in this story, the door stayed open. Let me tell you what you will have by the end. You will know what a court decided more than a year ago. You will know what was offered this month in writing, and you will know why the word ambush does not survive contact with the paperwork. I am not here to tell you how to feel about this man. I am here to hand you the receipts. Then you decide. Let us start with the rule, because every verdict needs a standard. In this country, security for royals and public figures is not a birthright. It is a decision. A committee called ravec makes it. They weigh the threat, they weigh the role, they weigh the moment, and they do it case by case for a whole list of people, not one prince alone. Harry is on that list. So is the singer Elton John. So is Baroness Lawrence. 7 high-profile names, all handled the same careful way. That is the standard. Security follows risk and role. Experts decide. The same rule for everyone on the list. So tonight's question is simple. Did something new and targeted happen to this one family? Or did the same old rule apply the same old way? To answer that, you have to read a court judgment that most channels skipped right over. Rewind to May of last year. The 2nd of May, 2025, Harry stood in a London appeal court, and he lost. Not a small loss. The Court of Appeal, 3 senior judges, the most senior civil judge in England sitting among them. They looked at the decision to lower his protection. They looked at how it was reached, and they wrote something you deserve to hear plainly. The court said Harry was stepping in and out of the protection ravec provides, outside the country, outside the group, inside the country, protection judged as appropriate, case by case, on the facts of each visit. Then came the line that ends the argument. The court said it was impossible to call that reasoning illogical or wrong. And then 4 more words. Indeed, it seemed sensible. Sensible. That is the court's word, not mine. So here is your first receipt. The arrangement everyone is calling an ambush this July was examined by 3 judges last May, and they called it sensible. That is not a snub, not new, settled. And look at what Harry did next. He did not accept it quietly. He gave an interview to the BBC. He said he would write to the Home Secretary and ask her to review the whole committee, which tells you something simple. He knew, back in May, that this arrangement was the arrangement. This was not sprung on him last week. He has been living inside this ruling for over a year. If you have ever felt like the only person reading the actual judgment instead of the headline, do me a favor. Comment the word receipts and let me find you down in the thread, because the next part is where the story quietly falls apart. Late June this year, the Sussexes announced the trip themselves. 5 days in Britain, the 7th to the 11th of July. Their children coming along for the first time in years. Remember, the last time those 2 children were on British soil was June 2022 for the late Queen's Jubilee. That was also the last time their grandfather is known to have seen them. So the stakes here are real. Nobody sensible pretends otherwise. And the trip had a real purpose. Charities this man has served for a long time. Wounded soldiers, sick children, the Invictus Games, heading to Birmingham next summer. Good causes, genuine ones. And then the king did something worth writing down. Charles offered them a place to stay, not just any place. A royal residence, the kind that comes with police protection already attached to it. Read that again. A residence with protection offered. And then Harry's own spokesman said something remarkable. He said, accommodation had never been the issue. Never the issue. From Harry's own side. So the picture the story sells you, a family with nowhere safe to turn, sits right next to a documented offer of a protected royal home. Those 2 things cannot both be true. This is the door. And on the record, the door stayed open. Now watch how the week actually unfolded. A tabloid reports the committee turned the protection request down days before arrival. Then, within a day, comes a new plan. Maybe the family flies in from mainland Europe for just 24 hours, and the briefing points a finger at, quote, those around the king. So a 5-day charity visit shrinks to a rumored day trip, and the blame lands on palace aides, all in about 72 hours. Now, here is where I have to be fair because a verdict you can trust does not hide the other side. Harry's argument is not nothing. Let me give it to you straight. He says ravec skipped a step, that it did not run its own full risk review for him, the way its own rulebook describes, and the court actually agreed the usual process was not followed to the letter. He says the threats against him are real. In my opinion, that part deserves respect. This is a man whose mother died being chased. That fear is not a performance. And he raises a fair question. Should anyone's safety depend on whether they are counted as a working royal? His children did not choose to be born into this. That is a real argument, and honest people land on both sides of it. So I am not going to sit here and tell you Harry has no case. He has a case, but a case is not the same as a claim. And the claim on trial tonight is a very specific one. So let us weigh it. The standard against the behavior. The claim is that this July was an ambush, a rug pulled at the last second, a door slammed by people around the king. The record says 3 things. 1, the arrangement is not new. A court tested it last May and called it sensible. 2, the court traced it back to a choice. Harry stepped out of the group in 2020, and the tailored system is the answer to his own in and out status. The judges said so themselves. 3, this month, a protected royal home was offered, and his own team admitted the housing was never the problem. So here is the reading I keep coming back to. You cannot be ambushed in July by a decision you already lost in May. The timing feels sudden. The substance is more than a year old. And that gap between how sudden it feels and how old it truly is, that gap is the entire story. There is one more layer, and it is the part I find hardest to look away from. Look at the shape of it. A settled legal loss gets retold months later as a fresh emotional wound. The date changes, the feeling gets renewed, but the underlying facts do not move an inch. In my opinion, that is a pattern worth naming. Not a lie, a reframe, the same loss, dressed in this month's calendar, and the children sit at the center of the retelling every single time, as the reason, as the stakes. I understand the instinct. Any parent would lead with their children's safety. But when the safety story keeps arriving, exactly when a trip needs a headline, a careful viewer is allowed to notice the timing. That does not prove a motive. I cannot see inside anyone's head, and I will not pretend to, but it does raise the question the paperwork keeps asking. Why does the emergency always feel new when the ruling always stays the same? Here is the sentence I want you to sit with. A door you were handed the keys to is not a door that was slammed in your face. That is what the record shows. The key was offered, the room was protected, the story left it out. So let us not lose the human part in all of this. It is genuinely sad that 2 small children may not see their grandfather this summer. On that, I feel for everyone involved. King Charles is not a young man, and time with grandchildren is not a thing you ever get back. But sadness is not the same as blame, and blame has to follow the record, not the feeling. So here is the verdict this channel reaches. Read the receipts and decide for yourself, but here is where they point me. The 11th hour ambush does not hold up. What actually happened is quieter and older. A man made a choice in 2020. A committee applied a rule. A court called that rule sensible in 2025, and in 2026, a protected door was held open and turned down. I have a name for this pattern, a settled rule, retold as a fresh wound, not a snub, not fresh, a rerun. The door stayed open, the keys were offered, and the family, for reasons only they can explain, chose not to walk through it. So here is my question for you, and I read the comments closely on this one. If a court looked at this exact arrangement in May and called it sensible, can the same arrangement be an ambush in July? Can you lose the same thing twice? Tell me below. Tell me where the receipts point you. And if you want the record before the reaction every single time, then subscribe. On this channel, we read the paperwork first, then we let you reach the verdict.